Hi, I thought it was time to do something about diet. It's Easter at the moment, it's Good Friday and the kids are home, so I've been relegated to the garden. It's England, I hope it doesn't rain, but I'll press on if it does. You never know whether it's going to. So Easter, eh? It's weird, isn't it? It's a combination of processed sugar and religion. Two of humanity's most weird inventions, and harmful, I think. And I mean, how did the story of Zombie Jesus become associated with gorging ourselves on chocolate eggs? It's very weird. But then again, it just shows how many things humans have made up that's so bizarre. And in the field of diet, there are so many misconceptions. I've called this the Insider's Guide to Diet just because, well, I've tried absolutely everything over the last 6 decades, really, since the 60s. I was born in 62. So I've pretty much tried everything. I've always been fascinated with it. And for various reasons, gone from one diet to another. And also, I've had a proper disease. Well, autoimmunity, psoriatic arthritis, and loads of other niggles, excuse me, to test it out on. So, also another reason is that I've worked with a lot of people as well with this, and they seem to have similar results that I do. And I've also been very active in groups and social media and whatever. So I've seen people discussing this at great length on all the groups. And, it seems very unscientific to say, oh, you've been looking at Facebook groups. But honestly, the weight of the anecdotal evidence now is so huge that you can get a very good idea of what different diets are doing to different people. I think the one that I've had the most experience with is vegetarianism, which well, my introduction to that, I suppose, after growing up through the 60s and 70s, very healthy with a standard diet of kind of meat and 2 veg and the odd bit of cereal and toast and cheese and whatever thrown in. But in those days, without the EMFs, without the Wi-Fi, without all the negative influences we have these days, probably not so much glyphosate and whatever on the wheat, it wasn't really so harmful. And you could stay pretty healthy on it. The first time I noticed any symptoms was probably about 18 years old, travelling in an old wagon that we had, and we were travelling around Europe, me and a good friend of mine, and we decided that macrobiotic was the thing to do, and veggie, and so we started feeding ourselves on brown rice and pulses and stuff, and that was the first I ever knew of pain, like joint pain. I started to get a bad back and whatever, and of course my arse exploded all the time. It was all sorts of digestive issues, but it wasn't really a clue. I didn't know what was going on. I was probably too stoned most of the time to realise I was a proper old hippie, young hippie. But then getting into the TM movement, the Transcendental Meditation movement, and vegetarianism became a bit of a way of life. Not veganism, but vegetarianism, very much based on grains and pulses again. Definitely a lot of digestive issues. And vegetarianism, well, you see, I don't really rate that as particularly any different to a normal diet, because most people just eat, well, eggs and dairy and whatever. I'm talking about lacto-ovo vegetarian. And people eat that, and it's still a pretty inflammatory diet because it's based on, excuse me, grains and pulses, and it's just adding a chicken breast or some tuna or something, like a lot of veggies do when they decide they need a bit of meat. Just adding something like that to a veggie diet doesn't really make it any different. I don't think, with all the anti-nutrients you've got in grains and whatever, it doesn't make it very different to a regular diet. So I can't see any difference, except some people report initial benefits from giving up meat. But is it really giving up meat? Is it just that when they become veggie they get more health conscious in all aspects? Probably, but anyway, it didn't do me much good. Over the decades of being vegetarian, on and off, adding bits of chicken and fish here and there, but mostly a sort of pulse and grain-based diet, I started to get all sorts of issues. I started to put on a lot of weight, started to get inflamed, bad back, all sorts of issues. And then in 2010, I got psoriatic arthritis. Now, I'm not really going to get into too much of the autoimmunity of it. Underneath this, I'll link to a video I did on the 10 top tips for reversing autoimmunity. It's by no means all about diet. So when I got that sick, because I had that veggie mentality, I decided, okay, I've got to go further down that road. I've got to be vegan. So I started being vegan. I was basing on salads, and I'd cut the grains out, so there were initial benefits, because grains are terrible things, but, you know, especially if you have autoimmunity, then it's a closed book. No more grains, no more. So, you know, salads and chickpeas and things like that, and I was still in pain. And so then I went raw vegan, started doing all the juicing and stuff. I lost a load of weight, and a few issues cleared up. And you see, I was already quite experienced with diet, so I still thought this was the way to go. But it didn't do any good, really, and I lost all my muscle and I became pretty emaciated. Now, I think the thing with veganism is, a lot of vegans, it's their first dietary experiment. They come off a standard diet and they do a bit of Googling and they see all the lovely benefits of it and plant-based diets and all this, and they might have initial benefits. But I think the initial benefits quite often go wrong in time. You know, there's all sorts of nutritional deficiencies. I got a lot of brain fog. I got all kinds of things, and you know, you can see a lot of vegans once they've been doing it quite a while. They do get pretty emaciated, and you know, there's always some that are healthy on it. But what is this? Is this usually the young ones who have just come to it recently, and they're probably pretty good genetically. They haven't suffered any illnesses, but I think the benefit for me of actually starting all this once I was already autoimmune is that it's like an escalated, an accelerated process, rather. You can see really what the body thinks of veganism. I suppose the other thing I've got against veganism really is you know, I know some lovely vegans. It's by no means all of them, but this real militant thing that people get. You know, a young person, they'll Google it, they watch Cowspiracy and What the Health, and immediately they're experts, and they decide, okay, they're going to save the planet. Now, I don't want to really get too much into the moral side, but when you look at the crops and how they displace species, the animals that get killed in the combine harvesters, the animals get poisoned by the glyphosates and whatever else gets sprayed on these awful grain and soy crops, it's really not that compassionate. So something's gone wrong there. If you have a look at maybe Leah Keith's Vegetarian Myth, The Vegetarian Myth is a great book, and an ex-vegan. She puts a lot of good points across there. Also, Alan Savory's stuff about rewilding the land and alternative viewpoints to feeding everybody with all these grains and dreadful soy things. So, moving on to groups. Now, for a while, when I was healing up and I'd actually discovered lower carb and I'd come off the veganism, I started to frequent these vegan groups and ask about their healing. Now, I wasn't actually seeing very complete healings most of the time, and I think a lot of the times a very high dropout rate. People give up on veganism. I was seeing people still on meds, still saying, oh, well, the doctor says this is irreversible, but it's been slightly reduced by veganism, so that's the way I'm going. It's a little bit of an illusion, really. A little bit of initial benefits, again, like the vegetarianism, but not really long term. And then, of course, when you mention that you do eat meat, then it just gets absolutely ridiculous. And there's all the attacks here, called a rapist and a murderer and abuser of my children for feeding them meat, and on it goes. So you can't really have an intelligent conversation once they figure out you do eat meat. So I wasn't seeing really very good results among the vegans on that. So, you know, big cross-section of the population, lots of militancy. I don't see it really. It may be for a temporary thing, for a reset for some people, maybe in the sun, you know, but it's a high carb, it's a high deuterium diet. It doesn't really work, especially in the north of England. And vegetarianism too. I have a lot of friends here who are vegetarian. There 2 friends died of cancer within 3 hours of each other last year. And it's very common. There's a lot of cancer among the spiritual types here who adhere to a grain and pulse-based diet. So I'm going to have to throw them into room 101, both of them. And a quick word now on veganism's interesting little cousin, fruitarianism. I'll tell you a secret about fruitarianism. Come closer and listen to this. It's fucking mad. It is. Don't do it. It's nonsense, particularly in the north of England where we are. You know, young people, they might do it for a bit. They might get a few benefits. They might, you know, they might feel good about themselves and whatever. Oh, we're eating all this pure stuff. But really, the nutrients are lacking. Huge deuterium overload, huge carb overload, loads of sugars. It's going to go wrong at some point. Why can I be so rude about it? Because I did that too. I didn't do it for long, maybe a month or two before it got on top of me so bad. If you think the sugar cravings, when you're very low carb, are bad, you wait till you have the cravings for some proper, actual savoury food when you're eating fruit all day. You know, somebody might, in the sun, might make it work for a bit. And I have to admit with embarrassment that I did get taken in by a durian rider for a while. I was listening to him, but I mean, how barking mad is he? He really is pretty unstable. He's hilarious, but he's pretty unstable. And, you know, the most nutritious thing I've seen him put in his mouth is a huntsman spider, and he spat that out. So, you know, anyway, fruitarianism, no, please don't do it. It's absolutely silly. So moving on to paleo, a lot of ex-vegetarians come to paleo. There's still a lot of nice vegetables there. They've cut the grains out, so there's often some great results. They are, because the grains go, you know, if you have a little bit of IBS or something, it's going to get rid of that probably. Yeah, all this whole food plant-based thing, still adhering to the 5-a-day nonsense. In fact, if you really get paleo right, it's probably, yeah, it's perfect. If you have no illnesses, if you have no inflammatory history, paleo means that you're eating what the planet would provide for you in the Paleolithic times. The trouble is that they're all arguing about which foods are paleo and which aren't. So they're all saying, is a banana paleo and whatever. Well, where do they live? And also all the fruits that they're eating and root vegetables probably don't grow anywhere near where they live. So in the sun, you might get away with the paleo thing pretty well. But what is paleo? There's a blog post on my site, what is paleo exactly? I mean, it's ridiculous. They're going on about you know, banana pancakes. You go to the paleo groups, and there's more healing than there is on the vegan groups, for sure. But until they get the hang of really what it is, and they think it's some kind of template that they have to adhere to, where somebody's always posting, oh, look, I've discovered banana pancakes every 2 days. I used to go mad. I used to be on them sort of trolling around, trying to shut down all the bread and cake posts, and they're trying to make all this food, like the vegans try and make false meat out of their processed soy and mushroom scrapings from the factory floor, corn and whatever. So, you know, I used to go around the paleo sites just making ridiculous comments and trying to create farce out of the bread and cake posts. But, you know, I mean, let's face it, a coconut flour and banana macaroons or whatever, I mean, yeah, fuck off. What caveman is going to ever have eaten that? It's absolutely ridiculous. So this is why a lot of those people aren't getting well. They're not paying attention to light cycles. They're not figuring out what would they eat, where they live. So moving on, low carb, high fat and keto. Yes, I did this, and this was, I really did reverse an awful lot of issues on this, and I started to get my muscle back. You know, being in ketosis, very healing. You go on the groups, you're starting to get some people who are very, very educated. They've come to this from experimenting with everything else. There's ex-vegans, ex-vegetarians, ex-paleo people. So, yeah, some very educated people, very wise people, doing very, very well on it. And so, very good for diabetes. Obviously, people are just knocking diabetes out because it's a blood sugar issue and whatever, but it's a little bit more complicated with, I think, with cancer and with autoimmunity. Sometimes people are still having gut issues from these vegetables. So, the miracles that I've seen since going 100% carnivore, which is what I eat now, you go to the carnivore groups and I don't know, is it out of desperation that people have tried everything else? Is it just because they are the most educated people because they've had to go through everything else and educate themselves to have the confidence that it's okay to eat just meat and fat? But I see healing stories on there that are extraordinary. Even people who have just dropped the last of the non-starchy veg, suddenly there's a huge increase. And it doesn't have to be just for the people who are ill. it can be, look at Sean Baker, who's very vocal about the whole carnivore thing now. I'd recommend looking at his group, and it's the World Carnivore Tribe. Also, Zero Carb Zen, great website, Sean Baker's N equals many, where he's trying to put together more of these anecdotal stories, so that, because no one's studying it, to just prove that it is okay. And if you look at your ancestral heritage, well, the Inuit were fine on it, the Maasai were fine on it. They got ill when the Western foods came in, but it's got a huge history. Stephenson's book, I could recommend that very highly. It's full of typos and whatever. It's difficult to read, but Stephenson's book, The Fat of the Land, he lived with the Inuit early last century for a long time, and he lived on meat, and then they experimented on him. They put him in a lab and whatever. And he was absolutely fine. So yeah, 100% carnivore. What are the downsides? Well, some people can find it a bit boring to start with. It's difficult to get people onto it. When I work with people, it's much easier to heal people who are on a standard diet, because the vegetarians and vegans, they have all this dogma. You've got to get through, I can't eat meat, I can't do this, it's bad for you. But the standard people go, buttered steaks all day long. Oh yeah, give me a bit of that. So they're easier, then they heal. So the downsides is a bit boring to start with. Well, is it really? I mean, when you refine your tastes a bit, it's not. The different cuts of meat are great, the beef's great, fish is great. There's so many different things you can do. My tastes have refined. Maybe it takes a while to switch over, but we've used food as a recreation for too long. We need all this ridiculous diversity, and you've got to have these biscuits and this vegetable and that fruit and that. But do we really? No, we don't. The cultures might well eat whatever was in season. They may eat one type of animal for months and then another type of animal. This is what happened with the Inuit. So what are the upsides? Well, it's so simple. It's so simple to do. It's simple to cook. It's, you don't have to think about your shopping really. And as I said, tremendously educated people. It might get a little different now. It's becoming quite a fad, so there might be fewer people, or more people coming to it who have a bit more confidence and haven't had to search through all the literature and experiment on themselves. But that's okay. That's cool. It's safe enough. So, should everybody just eat meat? Is this what I'm trying to say? No, I'm saying get rid of the dogma about everything. It's about light cycles. It's about where you live. It's, if you're healthy and you live on the equator, by all means eat fruit. The thing about meat is, it is the most digestible food. It's the most prized food among every culture. It's the safest food. It really is. If you're eating wild-caught fish and grass-fed meat, it's really, really safe, and it's digestible, and you can take your diet right back to that. If somebody's really sick, inflammatory issues, digestive issues, autoimmunity, yes, take it back to meat and fat. Do Natasha Campbell McBride's early gap stage thing with loads of bone broths. It's so healing, it's so safe. Take it back to that, and then add in what you like. Experiment. I'm going to carry on eating it until my body tells me different, because I just feel so great on it. It's effortless weight maintenance, no inflammation. It's about all sorts of other things. Pay attention to the light cycles, add in what you like, but use your intuition, develop your intuition. Don't get stuck in dogma, like I'm this, I'm a carnivore, I'm keto, I'm paleo, I'm vegan. Anyway, so that's about it really. That's my views on all the different diets, what they've done to me. There's a link to a blog post I did where you can see a pictorial history of what it did to my body. So have a look at that, if you like, linked in the description below. And yeah, come and join me on my Facebook group as well. There's the big serious ones like Principia Carnivora and World Carnivore Tribe and whatever, but I've got one called 100% Carnivore and Beyond. It also deals with all the other stuff, light EMFs, emotional stuff, all kinds of other things that contribute to health. So come and visit us on that. It's fun. It's a lot of banter and quite irreverent. And come along and join us. And that's me done on that subject. And sign up to my YouTube channel to get some notifications of other stuff I'm making. And thanks for listening. See you next time.